What's going on, everybody? Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kieran, and I like to help people using a spiritual perspective. So today, guys, I wanted to talk to you about something probably that we all have thought about, and it's death. It's death. Okay, that's the whole video. It's just all about death. And the reason that I did this video today is because it's snowing outside for the first time in this season. I don't know, what is it? Still fall, but it's snowing, and it is Canada, so I can't really be shocked. But wintertime and fall represent decay, they represent death, they represent a renewal of things. So I kind of wanted to talk about death and the sort of the reality of death and what it really means to the individual, what it means for you, what it means as a human, and what it means for a spiritual being having this sort of human experience. Okay, so I'm going to start and kind of get into what the reality of death can allow you to do. Okay, so first and foremost, death obviously naturally happens to all things. Now, the opposite of death, I don't think, is life. The opposite of life is birth. So death sort of is a transformation. Okay, the physical vessel dies away. That is the first fact that we all know about death. Okay, now beyond that is where we start getting into different sort of beliefs, different ideas about what happens after death that ultimately none of us can prove to be real, but that we do understand maybe intuitively that there is something that carries our spiritual energy elsewhere, that there is something within us that is beyond the physical body, which is one of the first truths of this sort of awakening process, is that you are not your physical body. That's not what you are. It's not really what you're made of, right? So your physical vessel then dies, it decays, right? As it does over time, or if you've ever had a wound or anything like that. It's this sort of a decaying process of things deteriorating over time. Okay, and so humans can live to be even 100, right? But even the quality of life those last 20, 30 years isn't what it was the first 20, 30, all right? So there's this gradual apex, and then it's a decline. And that apex and decline isn't even the same for everyone, because some people are born without the use of their legs, some people can't see. The body is not treated equal. There's very clear limitations of the body. And these are the things that people need to readily accept into their life. Okay, now death is not one of those things that people talk about. In fact, it's something that people get very emotional, very sad about, maybe rightfully so. But this category of death looms over every one of us, and yet none of us are presently aware of its effects or that it can have on us, because we all treat death as if it's something that will happen to someone else. Especially people that are spiritual, they think that they're protected from everything. And in many ways, you certainly are, but you're not protected from death, and you're not protected from ailments. You're not protected because if you don't take care of your body, it doesn't matter how many angels or guides you believe in, eventually something's going to happen. Okay, so what happens with this concept of death is that humans ignore it. Okay, we have funerals that we go through, bike rides through, walk through, but nobody ever takes the time to stop and sit, which is something that you should do. It's actually great advice that I have for you guys. If you want to get closer to death and live your life more presently, spend time in graveyards. Go walk through them. Go look at the gravestones. You will see some tragic stuff, pictures of people younger than myself died years ago or this year or something, and it really puts life into perspective. Okay, and that's what death should do, and yet we don't readily talk about it. But the reality of death is there is a transformation, there is a physical decay, there is something occurring that then no longer exists to be here, the material breaking away. And when we don't talk about it, when we don't readily accept death, when we don't decide to make it a conversation, when we don't want to sort of have intimate conversations with people about the nature and the reality of said death, we live our lives as if we are always going to be a certain way, as if we're always going to be young, as if we're always going to be in the same body, in the same mental state, in the same type of way, that we're going to be intact. But we're not going to be intact. I'm not even as intact as I used to be. Okay, and like for instance, I can't even really eat dairy or gluten anymore. I don't have an allergy to either of them, but I've sort of become intolerant to both. Dairy will ruin my entire system, and gluten will ruin my entire system, but both in very different ways, for lack of better words. And so those things that I used to be able to eat, I can't even do that anymore. right? I can't have a milkshake without needing to be on standby to the bathroom. I can't do that. You know what I mean? So even in this way, things change, right? And that's the reality, the nature of things. And when you accept the reality of death, what happens is that you start to live more presently. You start to understand that at any moment you could be gone, right? And recently I've been getting these flashes of death, these flashes of like the ego sort of pausing and sort of going on a blip, and then like I'll look in the mirror and I'll go, wow, like I could be, this experience could be gone at any moment. It's a scary yet profound thing that I've been experiencing the last month or so, and maybe a couple times a week, where it's sort of like, whoa, what the hell? And I've always been familiar with death, but I don't think any of us really accept it truly or understand it in a daily way. And then I did spend a lot of time in graveyards, along the gravestones, things like that, because it did put things in perspective. I just sort of naturally became drawn to doing those things. So when you accept the reality of death, when you start having an open conversation with yourself about it, when you look at your body, when you take into account real death, real decay, what happens again, your life becomes more focused, more present. There is an energy about you that you can start to enact a little bit more. You stop thinking more and you start doing more, right? So you start thinking less, you start doing more. It's a better way to phrase that, okay? And what happens is that you just go and you just do things. You just start to live. Animals, for instance, don't live in the present, or they don't live in the future. They don't live with this threat of death looming over them. Now, they do live in a sense of fear mechanisms, of course, and that's another thing, right? But animals don't live with this presence of death, right? They don't, they're not with the reality that they're going to die, okay? Now, maybe some animals, again, who's to say? Some animals are very, very smart, but generally speaking, let's just go to accept that animals don't really have this idea that they're going to die, okay? And the only reason that I sort of put a disclaimer is because I know elephants, for instance, get very heartbroken when the other animals die. And that doesn't mean they're aware that they're going to die one day, but they're clearly affected by death, okay? So I'm not saying that animals aren't affected by the concept of death, but certainly who's to say that they're aware? So generally speaking, they're not aware that they're going to die, okay? But humans are. They're aware of death, okay? That's one of the intellectual abilities we have. We're able to tap into that awareness, okay? So with that reality, with those things that face us every day, with the death, whatever they're not, it's a shooting, or your grandparents die, or maybe your parent or someone that really care about, or an animal, or any people just in a massacre, or an apartheid, or a disaster. People die. People just get hit by cars. Shit happens. Vending machines fall on you. A shark attacks you. People die. Okay, these things happen, and we are inclined to avoid death. In fact, our whole natural human response is to avoid death and to avoid pain, because pain and death are almost always linked. Okay. Now, the reality of death, even metaphorically, is a sense that something is going to be decaying or taken away, and that will result in something terrible happening. So if X is taken away, somewhere down the line, death is the result. And that's how our brains work. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. So let's say that you have a shitty job that you hate, which may be many of you people. In fact, many of you might not even have a job, but you might have a shitty job. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you have a shit job. You work at Pizza Hut. I've worked at Pizza Hut. It's a shit job. So you work at this shitty job, Pizza Hut, and you hate it. You don't want to work there anymore, but you need the money, right? You have this mentality of, well, I need the money. Okay, so then let's say I'm playing devil's advocate. I come up to you and we're talking, and you say, well, I hate this job. I don't want to work here, but I need the money. And I say, well, why do you need the money? And then you would say something like, oh, well, I need the money because if I don't have the money, then I can't pay for my bills and I won't have a place to live. Okay, and then I say, well, why do you need a place to live? Why do you need a place to live? Why do you need to pay these things? It's like, well, I need to pay these things so I can communicate with people. I need to pay cell phones so I can talk, so that I can have opportunities. Why do you need opportunities? Well, opportunities to make more money, opportunities to find jobs, opportunity to do this. Well, why do you need, the place to live? Why do you need those opportunities? Well, because if I don't have the place to live and I don't have those opportunities, then I won't be able to make money, and I won't be able to stay in a place. Well, I'll be on the streets. And then, so it's, well, then what will happen if you're on the streets? You can just get another job. And most people at that point, they sort of deflect They sort of either stop coming up with an argument or they deflect because people automatically think they can't find another job, even though it's actually very easy to find another job. People think that it's not as hard as people think. Certainly, in a specialized field, it could be very hard to find another job, but there's opportunities everywhere. Okay, people think that the world just has a lack of opportunities, but that's not often the case. Sometimes it's where you are, sometimes it's who you know, but there's always something. Okay, maybe not the same job, but there's always something available. But people at that point, they kind of deflect and they either can't really come up with something, but if they could, a very honest person would then say, well, I need the job because if I don't have the job, if I don't have a place to live, then what happens is that I will go on the streets and I will die. And it always ends with the death. Always. So if you don't have enough money, if you examine it, why, all the way to the very bottom, it's because if you don't have it, you'll die. You'll be dead. And the same thing with relationships, with love. If you don't have this partner, what happens? You die alone, or you don't die with any kids. You don't die with anyone that loves you. So death, but now alone. Okay? If you don't have the house, you don't have security, you die on the streets. You are homeless. You don't have it, so you're afraid of death. But it's obviously still insane because there's tons of homeless people. Go to any city and you'll see that there's people that are alive without anything. So none of those things actually equal death. So most people, what they're worried about is something that inevitably is going to happen, death, but that they're afraid that because if one thing goes away, it equals death. Right? And that's not how it works, because we can't predict our own death. We can't even control it unless we're going to commit suicide at some point, and we don't understand even fully how it's going to work out in the end anyway. Right? Again, we have our intuition and we have our awareness. And that's all we really have. We don't have empirical proof in front of us, and that's not the way it works either. Okay, but regardless of that sort of debate, it's the reality of death that stops us from moving forward, that stops us from doing things. We don't take risks, we don't take chances, because if we do, we're afraid that at the end it'll result in death. Now, it's not something that people are consciously aware of, but it is at the root of everything. You just need to examine your own beliefs and examine yourself and analyze your own belief systems all the way down to the very bottom of why you believe something, and you'll often find it results in some kind of loss which would equal death, right? Why do I need money? Because I need to pay for my cell phone bill. Why do I need to pay for my cell phone bill? Because my cell phone bill allows me to keep in contact with clients, allows me to keep in contact with people, allows me opportunities to find jobs, allows me to pay for things, which in turn allows me to stay in a place. If I can't do those things, I lose money. I don't have money. What happens if I don't have money? I'm kicked out of this place. What happens if I'm kicked out of this place? I have nowhere to go. I'm stuck. Well, then that means that I'm going to be on the streets, which means I'm going to die. I won't have money for food. I'm going to die. It always comes back to that. But it's rarely the case for people, because if I did get kicked out or I didn't have any money, someone, because I have friends, I know people, somebody would give me an opportunity to stay with them. So I wouldn't actually end up dead or alone or on my own on the streets. So the things that we're very afraid of are often the things we don't even give ourselves the awareness of thinking about. But if we examined those beliefs, if we allowed ourselves to face death in a natural, normal way every day, or at least weekly, we would live our life so much more presently. We would be able to understand the beauty in life itself, this blip and the moment, right? 100 years, even living 100, that's gone in an instant. Turtles, or tortoises, one of those guys, they live longer than 100 years. Some of them, like what, 250, 300 years, something like that, maybe longer. But tortoises, they live longer than humans. Other animals live longer than humans. Tortoise is the only one I know off the top of my head. But human life is quick. It's over very quickly. Dogs, for instance, over even quicker. So cats, even quicker, right? Hamsters, hedgehogs, even quicker. So the death, humans are just somewhere in this whole, from 0 to 500 of just, maybe sort of average, really, in the middle. So death is this thing that if we're not willing to think about, if we're not willing to accept, we won't be able to do the things that we need to do because of how afraid we are of the results of doing them, right? Taking a risk to move somewhere. Well, you're afraid that if it all goes to shit, what will happen at the end is you'll be dead. So it all becomes this response. It all becomes how we respond to things, reconditioning our brain to respond to things. And that's why soldiers, in war, or that are trained for war purposes, they are trained to override the flight or fight response. And of course, to override the sitting still doing nothing response as well. So they're trained to get over this fear, so that they take action, that they think very critically, rather than rely on some primal sort of monkey brain, which is what most people are in tune to when their natural response. So look at even how you respond to fear, to problems, to pain, to a concept of arguments, to conflict. How do you respond to those? Because usually in those kinds of situations, when we feel something threatens us, we immediately get into this sort of mode, and we either stay still and freeze, or we run, or we fight. Right? So the person that gets very, very angry because somebody insults them, or somebody insults them and they walk away and they don't want to deal with it, or somebody insults them and they just sit there and take it and feel powerless. Those three kind of options are how people generally react to conflict, to stress, to pain, to death, to things like that. Soldiers are trained to rewire those parts of themselves through hard conditioning. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to go do all that kind of conditioning, but we can do things to take care of ourselves, to take care of our own mortality here, accepting death in a regular way. And again, best way to do that is to familiarize yourself with death, going to graveyards. It's a beautiful way, truly it is, a beautiful way to accept your mortality here, and to really ground yourself in the present, because it could be over at any moment. I could truly be dead today, and these flows, this consciousness, this experience of this life around me right here that I can't really grab, but it's there, right? This life, I wouldn't be a part of it anymore. I would be dead. And that also means that I wouldn't have to deal with any of this shit, but I would be dead, okay? And it's better to be alive, generally speaking, okay? Because the things that I do like experiencing outweigh the things I don't like experiencing, I think, for me, anyway. So when we do talk about death, and we do have this natural, then we can get into some sort of the spiritual side of things, some of the more esoteric stuff. And what that means, guys, is like I said at the beginning of the video, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, so you only need to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and sort of become aware of your thoughts. If you have a thought that says, I like pasta, there's an awareness of that thought that you like pasta, and then even farther, or even further, there is then a thought, or there's even awareness of that awareness. Okay, so there's something that's recognizing the thought, otherwise how would you know you're thinking? And then there's something that recognizes that recognition, and that is your awareness. It's the deep sides of yourself. It's the true essence of who you are. It's the energy which you may or may not have experienced if you're watching my videos, if you resonate with them, the sort of the interconnectedness of it all, the beauty, the magic that lies just beneath the surface, the 4D, the 5D, all these concepts that we talk about on a regular basis within these sort of spiritual communities. And we understand from that what happens is that the physical body decays, it dies, it transitions, but what's left is the real self. And that real self exists because that thing can never die. And that's not your personality, it's not your ego, it's not going up to heaven and being able to mingle with everybody that's ever died, because that's a great fantasy and an illusion in order to keep the ego self alive, in order to keep the identity of which you're accustomed to in this life alive forever. But that's not how it works. This is an identity. This is an expression of your soul. This is an expression of your energy. Myself, Kieran, is just an expression. This is just what I am here, and I'm always constantly growing and evolving as a person, as a character, and then the physical vessel will die, but my soul will always remain intact. Who I am, my essence will evolve, will grow, will learn what it has, and it will return to where it came from. Okay, it will return to source, return to the universe, return to whatever part of the galaxy I came from. If I resonate with being a starseed, the labels aren't important, but at the very essence and truth of it all, it will return to source. It will return back to where it's from. The identity, the persona of Kieran will be dead with this body, and my mind, the things I think, and I will just return to love. I'll return to the beauty of self, or to the beauty of true essence, to existence, to energy. I'll return to a part of that and go back into the waters, into the ocean. I'll be an ocean drop, returning to returning to the ocean, right? A raindrop returning to the water, the sea, right? These sort of ideas here about just being interconnected. We're all this wave, right? A wave, and then the awareness, the enlightenment is realizing that we're a part of the ocean here, right? That we're all this connected sort of thing, that we're all these drops of water, part of a larger pool of water. And so when we're done expressing ourselves, our body decays, it's gone, and we're back. We're done. We're somewhere, but not this, but something, our real true selves. And so death is just this physical manifestation of stopping to exist within this world, and then what happens is that you just go, you return to something, and it is very much metaphorically like exiting a video game. Okay, if you've ever done like 3D reality where you have those stupid looking goggles on your face, it's like exiting that. It all feels very, very real, very amazing, but then you exit it and you're like, woo. And here's an even better example is that when you're really into a movie or a TV show and you are so into it and you're feeling it, you're with it, and then the credits roll and you were ignoring everything, phone calls, your day, the fact that your dad killed your mom, all the shit that was bothering you all day has now suddenly, it didn't matter. For those 2 hours or however long the movie was, you were into that movie and nothing could have affected it. And then when it was over, you were like, wow, shit. And then everything starts to rush back. That's death. That's life and death. That's the existence here is you're in it, 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 and then, whoa, I'm not in it anymore. Huh. And so it's up to us to be aware during that time rather than fully in life, because if we're fully in life all the time, then we get caught up in the drama, right? We get caught up in the movie, we get caught up in the self, but we're not the movie. We are the person in the theater watching the movie. But what happens is we think we're in the movie, okay? So having an awareness, being ready, accepting your mortality, accepting your fate, being aware of these things while also experiencing life fully, but choosing how to discern those moments so that you don't get caught up in the drama is the most important part. But you can't really do that until you accept your limits, accept your body's limits, accept your physical limits, and accept that your body's going to die. Essentially, like the title of the video, accept the reality of death in literally and metaphysically, metaphorically, accept all those kinds of ways, metaphysically, metaphorically, and literally. Accept death as the reality of what's going to happen to you in your body and the things that this expression that you're expressing, right? And some will live on, some will live on ideas, you'll live on in memory. That's not even up to you. That's just what will happen as a result of you living your life to the fullest and creating some sort of legacy to be left here, something to live on, something to be born in place of your death, allowing there to be a birth of some kind, allowing things to continue on as they always will. Because again, it's a physical thing. So it's like exiting a video game, exiting a movie, exiting a 3D Oculus sort of thing, and then you return somewhere else with this higher sort of consciousness, and then that's fine. Your body is now gone. The body limits, and that's also fine. So guys, that's the reality of death. Whether or not we're going to be talking about the sort of debates about reincarnation or what happens with the soul or where the soul goes, that's, I have my own opinions on that, my own beliefs, my own downloads on those things. I have spiritual objectivity, so I tend to, it's all the same kind of idea, but at the very basis, we're not humans. Who we really are is something beyond that, spiritual beings, light bodies. Okay, so death, familiarize yourself with it and accept it, accept their nature and reality, and you can live your life more fully. You can truly do more because you'll be more in the present moment. And you won't have to be afraid of doing so many things, taking so many risks, going after your dreams. You'll be able to do so. So I think, personally, what I'm trying to say to you guys ultimately overall is that by accepting the nature of death is the best way for you to get in tune with the present moment, for you to go after your dreams, go after what it is that you want to do, rather than worrying about any others, these topics and stuff, having to heal all this shit, do all this kind of crap. You don't really need to do all that. You just need to live more presently, and the things will take care of themselves anyway. Okay? So guys, that's my video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you guys. I hope that you guys enjoy your Sunday. If it's snowing where you are, stay inside, watch a good movie. If you have nice weather, then screw you. I'm a little bit jealous. All right, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.